Now, an ample food supply for civilians is a no-brainer in the critical development of any civilization. But the Aztecs perfected a unique method, not only to provide a substantial food supply for its civilian populace, but to fuel the military expansion of its empire.
This revolutionary engineering was called Chinampas, a system that allowed them to literally create new land to farm and to live on.
If you're going to have a city of any size, you have to provide room for them. And so what they did was build up these chinampas in the lake bed.
Basically, a chinampa is an artificial island built in the lake.
They look like narrow football fields, about 300 feet long by about 30 feet wide. A chinampa was built by weaving a web of sticks floating in the water and piling reeds on top of them. Mud was then scraped from the lake bottom and piled atop the reeds to form the chinampa. It took 4 to 6 men 8 days to build the average chinampa. They were connected to the city by massive navigational canals that would take thousands of men months to build.
A chinampa like this one could produce up to 7 crops a year, whereas a farm on the mainland could yield 1, maybe 2, maybe 3 at the most.
Landscape holds the key to culture. And the strength of the people of the Andes springs from their relationship to the land. There is no better place to understand that relationship than the ancient city of Machu Picchu. When Machu Picchu was discovered in 1911 by Hiram Bingham, it was famously described as a lost city. In truth, Machu Picchu was always an integral part of the Incan Empire, clearly linked to the entire network of roads that reached back to Cusco and extended for 22,000 kilometers, binding together the longest empire ever forged in the Americas. Built on a strategic spur high above the Urubamba River, it guarded the approaches to the Sacred Valley, while at the same time dominating the eastern lowlands, source of coca, medicinal plants, and shamanic inspiration. But this is just the beginning of the story of Machu Picchu.
Some of these buildings are so well made, the foundations are so good in the carvings and so on that we're seeing, that it's clear that at least part of the population here, or part of the buildings at least, were used for the Inca nobility.
We know that Machu Picchu was designed from the start with a single architectural plan, a plan itself conceived within the framework of Incan cosmology and rooted in ancient notions of sacred geography.
Once you get those kind of concepts being built into your head, you come to a place and instead of looking just at the stones, the first thing I do is I look at what's around. And once you have that kind of mindset, frankly, it's not too hard to all of a sudden start to notice that there are these certain alignments taking place.
When you climb some trail like this to Huayna Picchu, you begin to get a sense of what it was like to...
Whoever designed Machu Picchu would have climbed every peak, built high survey platforms to observe by day and night the position of mountains and the movement of constellations.
It's not just like this is sort of a mental Lego kind of game here, an intellectual game, because all of that has its practical consequences, because these are the deities that control the climate, fertility of land, livestock. So you get all of that in there, trade, growing of coca, you name it. Anything that's a vital part of Inca life is affected by these great mountain deities and sacred parts of the landscape.
The two most sacred mountains of the Inca were Ausangati, overlooking the valley of the Coyariti, and Salcantay, which is due south of Machu Picchu. The actual Apu of Machu Picchu is Huayna Picchu, the iconic Sugarloaf Peak which dominates the site. The sacred center of Machu Picchu is the Intihuatana, a curious carved stone that was called by Bingham the hitching post of the sun. Johann Reinhard was the first to notice that the Intihuatana echoed the shape of Huayna Picchu.
Yeah, what drew my attention initially was this play of light on the Intihuatana, the stone, exactly replicating the play of light on the Huayna Picchu, the sacred peak that is due north. And the interesting thing here is that the alignment that continues on due south with this carved stone is in the direction of Salcantay, the major sacred peak of the entire region.
Johann realized that Huayna Picchu, the Intihuatana, and Salcantay were configured in a perfect north-south alignment. But he also noticed that when the Southern Cross rose to its highest point in the sky, it sat directly over the summit of Salcantay. The Southern Cross, enveloped by the Milky Way, was one of the most important constellations to the Inca. And this revelation brought Johann right back to the Urubamba River, which to the Inca was the earthly equivalent of the Milky Way. Like a serpent, the Urubamba embraces Machu Picchu on its run to the Amazon.